everyone, and welcome to this edition of Inside the SAB. In this session, we'll be talking with Dr. Fred Huber, a longtime member of the Scientific Advisory Board. Dr. Huber got his PhD in nutrition way back in the early days at Texas A&M University, and then went from there to do his postdoctoral studies at the University of Texas, and then moved into the public arena, if you will, into the industry. And lucky enough for us, he joined us about 43 years ago now in the late 1970s, 78 or 79. So
right.
Welcome aboard, Fred. This is going to be fun.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to have an opportunity to talk about a subject that I have been concerned about for all my professional career. And, I think, and I've told you before, that the worst thing that ever happened to the human race was the identification, isolation, purification, and distribution of refined white sugar.
I remember years ago that you told me that exactly. We were having an SAB meeting and you told me, because we talk about health challenges all the time. She said, John, I think in the end, it's going to all be about sugar.
It's primarily going to be about sugar, and I think it's proven that way. Now, if we look back a little bit, one of the things, of course, that concerns me and concerns everyone else is the increase in sugar consumption. It was actually discovered about 2,000 years ago when they discovered sugar cane. That's when they started extracting it, purifying it, crystallizing it, and putting it in food. But if you look at the consumption data back in the early 1700, the actual consumption of sugar, refined white sugar, was about 4 pounds, which was about 1% of the actual calories that the average person took in. By 1800, they had grown up to 18 pounds.
Mm-hmm. That's per person per year, yeah?
Per person per year, per annum. By 1900, it had grown to 60 pounds.
Yeah. And
now we're looking at total consumption of caloric sweeteners up to 125, 26. In a recent article by the U.S. Department of Agriculture saying it's as much as 150 pounds per person per year. Yeah. And so that's over 20% of the total calories.
Right.
And of course, the problem with that, or one of the problems with that, is the fact that it's empty calories, and therefore the nutrients that we need from our food has to come from only 80% of our total caloric intake. And one of the things that really kind of disturbed me when we talk about things like this, particularly sugar, is we talk about the average. We talk about the per capita consumption, the average consumption. And I was reading a recent report that said, when you look at the average consumption, and I've always felt this way, that really doesn't mean anything, because the average consumption is way too high, several times the recommended amount. And we might have a tendency to think of ourselves, well, I'm average or I'm below average. But if you, for example, you and I, if our average consumption of sugar is, say, 5 pounds a year,
I hear you.
There's somebody out here that's consuming 250 pounds a year.
Yeah.
Because in the world of science, they always talk about averages, and it doesn't address the individual. And so I think that's one of the fallacies of science, because they can't be more specific than that. They expect the consumer to look and see what the average is, and we all know that the average is too much.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks, well, I don't get average, so I'm healthy. But that's kind of a fallacy, because our system, and I'm going to talk about this for just a little while, our system is not designed absolutely not designed to handle large intake of refined sugar.
Yeah. I noticed that if you think about the sugar consumption data, the numbers you gave, one of the things I like about a lot of the epidemiology that you get is when they break it down into quartiles or quintiles,
Yeah.
you can compare, that in the case of quintiles, the top consuming 20% against the bottom consuming 20%.
And they're consuming.
If that 150 or 120 pounds is the medium, that top quintile up there, the top 20% of consumers, has got to be doing hundreds of pounds more than that a year just to make the numbers work.
Yeah, it makes the numbers work, but it's also very misleading, I think. But back to what I was going to say, our metabolic system is not designed to handle sugar the way we consume it. For example, if you consume refined sugar, it is very rapidly absorbed. The blood glucose level goes up extremely fast. We have a safety mechanism. The safety mechanism is insulin. Insulin is basically a hormone that tells the cells we've got to get that blood glucose level down because it's an oxidizing agent. It destroys blood vessels and everything else. So we've got to get it down as a safety mechanism to protect our body. And the way we do that is we release insulin. And the insulin tells the cells, basically, it's a gatekeeper, tells the cells to let the glucose in the cell. Now, when the glucose gets in the cell doesn't need it. The cell doesn't want it. The cell can't use it. It can't use that much glucose in the cell because it's primarily used as energy. What does it do with it? It converts it to fat, F-A-T, in order to protect the cell. So the insulin protects the system by removing the glucose, putting it in the cell. Then the cell has to protect itself from the glucose. Strong oxidizing agent, causes a lot of problems. So it converts it to fat,
Yeah.
And
unless you're running a marathon, that sugar has no place to go, right?
It has no place to go.
And it's sort of interesting when you think about it, just as a little aside here, it's like the body's protective mechanism, its dumping ground for excess glucose is fat, right? That's where it just sort of hides it. You don't send it out through exhale it through your breath or get it through your pores. It has no choice, right? So it's sort of the end of the line.
And you have to think about something else too. The reason we have, as a safety mechanism, the reason we have fat storage is to protect us from famine. Now, if you think a long way back in history, we didn't sit down to 3 meals a day, or we didn't have access to all this food. We were hunters and gatherers. When we found something, we gorged ourselves, hoping that the body would convert it to fat so that when we hit a famine period, we could call on it. We don't ever get a famine period anymore. A person just, talking about quantities, like a soda drink that has 100 calories in it. Well, and it's small, 6 ounces or something other like that, have 100 calories. That's 12 grams. No, that's
25 grams of sugar.
Yeah. And so if you drink one that's got 200 calories in it, which is the regular size, that's going to be 50 grams.
Yeah.
50 grams of sugar, refined white sugar that the body can do nothing with except try to get it to the cells as quick as they can and try to convert it to fat as quick as they can and store it and reluctantly burn that fat. It's extremely hard metabolically to burn fat. You have to create a famine condition in the body in order for the system to start digesting that fat. It it will hold on to it just as long as it possibly can. So, we talk about, I don't know, you used a number the other day. You said the average consumption of fine white sugar was 77 grams a day. Well, if you drank a 200-calorie soft drink,
Yeah.
you already got 50.
Yeah.
Now, how many people do you know or we know that drink several of them every day?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't actually know very many, but I can tell you by the fact that those soda fountains appear just about everywhere and the soda pops appear just about everywhere, that there are a lot of people consuming a lot of that stuff.
That's a lot of people consuming a lot of that stuff. And most of the establishments now, the fast food establishment, give you a cup and you can go back and forth as many times as you want to.
Yeah. And they give you a cup that's like a quart.
Yeah. And, so they think they're doing you a favor.
Yeah.
And when actually they may be doing you a favor as far as the economic situation is concerned.
Maybe.
Because you can get you can drink all that you want. But it's like going to a buffet,
Yeah.
Go to a buffet and look at the people that's in the buffet. Why are they so overweight? Because they pay one price, they get all they want to eat, and they do.
They want to eat a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back just a moment here and talk about what went wrong a little bit. So sugars they're naturally occurring thing. In nature's plan, there's lots of sugars in the food supply. Yeah.
Yes, that's true, John. But they're totally different.
So, I understand, but it's there, but it's there in a way that takes a lot of, first of all, traditionally or historically, takes a lot of energy to get it. And then it takes a lot of energy to extract it from what you've eaten. So so it's not so much that naturally occurring sugar isn't something that nature planned for. It's this idea that we did all of that work now so that the body, you don't have to work to find the sugar in food, and then you don't have to work to get it out of what you ate. It's just sort of instantaneous, right?
Well, in reference to the natural sugars, we've talked about this a lot, the glycemic index, the glycemic age, because the natural sugars, it takes a lot of metabolic energy, a lot of metabolic time in order to extract those sugars.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're done for you, sugar is just like alcohol. There is no control mechanism on absorption. You eat refined white sugar or high fructose corn syrup, any of those sweeteners that have been purified, it goes straight to the brain, just like alcohol does. Goes straight to the bloodstream, But yes, natural sugars in their natural state, in their natural form, in the natural fruits and vegetables that we might consume, there is a control mechanism just through the digestive system that slows their intake.
Right.
We've talked about that in relation to sugar with a high fiber diet. It slows down the absorption of the glucose.
Yeah. Well, sugar in the presence of fats present, glucose is slowed down too. So, and when it occurs naturally in the food supply, that was nature's plan all along. And in fact, a big part of our biochemistry is really dependent on simple carbohydrates, right? The brain loves to burn simple carbs.
Right.
So it's just when we overwhelm the system with all of this sort of cheap and dirty glucose, if you will, that we encounter a problem. Is that correct?
I agree with that 100%.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Historically, sugar hasn't, if you look at the data you talked about, 1700, 1800, 1900, it was going up, but it was never very much sugar as a starting point. But what I noticed is that, for example, during World War II, there were sugar rationing was going on, right? It became in short supply. I don't know why that is. Maybe you know. Can you tell us why it became?
Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly why that was the situation. other than the fact that I think most of the machinery and manufacture and personnel were devoted to producing the wire machinery and everything.
Yeah.
And I think it probably made a great contribution to the limitations here. And plus, as you know, a lot of those food stamps, gasoline stamps, those stamps that you had to have during World War II in order to buy something, was to provide it for the military.
Yeah.
And it may not have been a national shortage as much as they wanted to make sure that they had enough for the military.
Right.
Now, I'm old enough to remember those stamps, and I remember living in a rural community where, aunts and uncles and cousins were all together, and they were always trading these stamps.
Yeah.
And, some of them get gasoline stamps and didn't even have a vehicle.
Yeah.
So that gave them some leverage. They could trade that for some sugar stamps or some other stamps. So it was
crazy.
I was young, but it was an interesting time to see all this negotiation going on, because that's the only way you could get some of these things.
So when you look at the what I call the real impact of health statistics, it seems like it all started happening sort of post World War II. So when we got out of World War II, there was a bunch of things sort of happened in the food supply. First of all, there was a tremendous industrialization of the food supply. Up to that point, we had more people living off the land than we did. And then there was an explosion of sugar-containing products and sweetener alternatives and things like that. And it's interesting that when you look at the diabetes data, for example, from 1950, right, that there's a direct parallel. As the increase in sugar consumption occurred, the increase in diabetes has occurred. I mean, it's stunningly similar graph.
Right.
And
weight.
Weight, right. Same thing with overweight and obesity, same sort of thing. So, you look at 1950, there were maybe less than 2 million diabetics in the United States. And you get to today where there are more than 30 million of them.
That's right.
And that's not a long period of time to have such a big explosion. And it's interesting that the two parallel that. So to me, that's one indication that sugar is a driver of chronic disease. Because obviously diabetes is a chronic disease, but it's also related to, overweight, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, metabolic syndrome, all of those things. Can you expand upon that a little bit? I know you've sort of looked at that data very closely.
Just the fact that the body is actually fighting the glucose. The blood glucose at such a high level. And it's not unreasonable to visualize it having an effect on all those organs, from the kidneys to the heart, the circulatory system. It's just, I sometimes, talking about the instance of diabetes, I think sometimes maybe the government had something to do with that. I don't know whether it's Democrat or Republican, but, sugar has been subsidized.
Right.
For
a long time.
For a long time. When I was first joined the industry back in 72, actually, sugar was going into food products that I was associated with. And it was the cheapest commodity that they could buy to go in that food. The only other thing that might rival it as far as price is concerned was salt. Now you look at some food processed foods, they have a lot of salt in them.
Yeah.
But sugar was subsidized by the federal government. The price was supported, and therefore you could buy a train load of sugar for 5 cents a pound.
Mm-hmm.
And so it encouraged that. Plus the fact, sugar is a very good preservative agent.
Yes, right.
It is a very good preservative. You can make a dry cereal coated with sugar, and it will never go bad. Now you put vitamins and minerals in it, they may oxidize or change, but I'm talking about just, it's a preservative. Salt's a preservative, and so it encouraged that behavior, encouraged the use of sugar because of the cheap commodity, the preservative effect. People like it. People like it. You can't unlike sugar. And so people buy it. And people consume it, and when I was a kid growing up, a soft drink was a real treat.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't average having a soft drink once a month. I promise you.
Yep.
Now, well, I can't even explain it. I can't even describe how terrible I think it is.
Yeah, but they're everywhere. They've become ubiquitous. If you think about it, everywhere you go, you're pretty much within arm's reach of some sort of sugar sweetened beverage or product of some sort. It's never far from us. We think of it as being convenient. I think there's a point where convenience becomes a little too over convenient and becomes deadly. So thinking about sugar, though, it's pretty easy to understand the impact, or pretty easy to draw parallels to the impact and the occurrence of disease. I mean, when you look at the data, it's not just overweight and obesity and diabetes and heart disease, it's kidney failure and non-alcohol fatty liver disease. And I read an article a while ago where a fellow said, as far as sugar goes, anywhere there are cells, there are problems.
Right.
Okay.
I agree with that. I agree with that because you can't separate it from all those things that occur as a result of excess sugar consumption. And it's I can't elaborate on it much more than that.
Right.
So contributes to all these conditions.
Yeah. Well, it's just the overload. So if we come back now, I know in the SAB, we talk about this sort of stuff all the time. Whenever we're putting products together, we're always doing that battle with the flavor and the mouthfeel and the texture and the taste, but keeping the sugar under control, right? Keeping it to a point where the sugar is in balance with other things that are there. When we did our glycemic response control development, if you remember back then, we spent a lot of time balancing the ratios between protein, fats, and sugars, carbohydrates, so that we gave the body enough the carbohydrate to sustain its needs, what we called good carbs, I think at the time, yet not so much that we would drive it into an insulin response, which was what glycemic response control was about. So it's not like you can just eliminate sugar from your diet completely. We need some carbohydrate. Okay.
No, you wouldn't want to eliminate sugar from your diet completely, or carbohydrates from your diet completely. But what we have to do, or what needs to be done, is get control of the individual, not the average. This average doesn't mean anything. The individual, we're going to have to start addressing, and we've tried to educate the people. We've talked to the people. And I think most of our distributors out there are very conscious. And I always almost find it as a contradiction sometimes that we educate our distributors, they know what to do, and they may actually be members of a group that least needs what we have because they have a good practice. Yeah. You understand? It's almost a contradiction.
Right. The healthiest people have the healthiest practices, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Healthiest people consume the healthiest product, and we provide healthy products for them. And, but in the meanwhile, we educate them, and they try to practice good nutrition.
Yeah. Well, I think there's always the issue of how you get that balance. I know for me personally, I like to get a lot of the sort of vitamins and minerals, or the sort of phytonutrients rather, that are associated with fruits and vegetables. And I also, I know that if you're going to eat a lot of fruit, you're going to get a lot of sugar. And even though it's a little bit slow to be metabolized,
much slower,
digested,
much slower,
very slow, it still ends up ultimately with a lot of calories there, unless I'm out running a marathon, which I don't do very often these days. Those calories are going to be, even though it takes all day to get them out, they're going to have to be digested. So there's this sort of philosophy that I have, is that, I consume fruits and vegetables. I try to consume more vegetables and fruit, but I try to consume those, knowing that if I take a product like carotenoids or flavonoids, that I can get a lot of those phytonutrients associated with fruits and vegetables without the sugar burden. Not to suggest that people shouldn't eat fruits and vegetables. We should eat them. Okay, we should eat a lot of them. But there's a way to get a very high density of these fruit and vegetable related phytonutrients without all of the sugars that might come along with them.
Exactly.
Which is one of the things we talk about in the SAB too. So, just to sort of to recap, okay, we people are that are listening probably wondering, well, what do I do? How can this help me? How do I apply this? And I think that there's a couple of things that have come out here. One is first of all, your body does need some sugar, needs some carbohydrate, because in nature's plan, it was there. Two, the thing to do is avoid the refined and processed versions of that, especially when they come in big doses like you get in a soda pop. 17 teaspoons in a 12-ounce soda or something like that. I mean, that is a lot of sugar, basically sugar water. So
25 grams in 100
yeah,
drink.
It's a bunch. It's a bunch. So, I think that in the SIB, like I said, we think about these relationships all the time and make these calculations. So it's safe to say, though, Fred, and you can comment on this for me as we bring this to a close. It's safe to say that if you eat a balanced diet, though, then avoid what I call the industrialized food products. Okay, because sugar is one of the first industrialized food ingredients, right? If you avoid the industrialized food products and focus on, the natural things that are present there, as I like to tell people, avoid the center of the supermarket and go to the extremes, because that's where you're going to find fruits and vegetables and things like that. Is not right in the front door, but off to the side. Then you can do okay. Is that a safe thing to say?
Is that a what?
Is that a safe thing to say? Safe way to
sure. That's a safe
stay
way.
Away from industrialized food products?
Pardon me. What you can do is also recommend that the people go out in the orchards and gather their own fruits and vegetables. If you think back historically, we could possibly overdose on fruits now because they're so readily available also.
Yeah.
But if you think back in history, and that's what I try to keep in mind, is we did not have this kind of food supply readily available. They had to hunt and gather, and our system is based on hunting, gathering mentality or need, not a mentality, but need. But I don't think anyone in general would eat enough fruits to overdose themselves on sugars at all. I don't think a person could eat that much.
Yeah,
because they are slowly metabolized, they're slowly absorbed.
And your body has another protective mechanism. I know from when I was a kid, we used to go out and work in the orchards here in Central California.
That's exactly right.
Cutting cots or picking prunes, and if you if you ate a few too many of those as you were working along, your body let you know that it was time to find a porcine companion, right?
That's exactly right.
You need to get that out of there.
Yeah, you just brought up another subject that I don't think not we GNLD or we Neo-Life or whatever, but the health people, the activity level,
the
exercise level, Now, you talk about running a marathon, consume too much or run a marathon and burn it off, et cetera, et cetera. But, the couch potato now is the way of life. And children don't have anything to do. They may exercise a little bit in school and all, but we don't exert ourselves. We don't have to exert ourselves. We don't have to exert energy to get energy.
No.
And that's the contradiction right now, because at one time we had to exert energy, to get food, get in. Now we don't do that.
Yeah. These days, you don't even need to get out of your car.
You don't even need to get out of your car. Go to one of those automatic drive up. They'll give you a super glove.
Yeah. So, I think just again, to summarize here, there's no doubt that the excess of sugar that appears in the diet, the numbers that we talked about, the averages of 120 or 150 pounds a year, pointing to the fact that some people at the upper end of that scale must be consuming 200 or 300 pounds, maybe more of this stuff a year, because there's a lot of people at the other end of the scale that are hardly ingesting any. So, but those are big drivers of disease. So no question that sugar is implicated in that. And I think that the key is for people is, like you say, exercise and things like that. And that's why the active lifestyle, the NEO lifestyle, as we call it, has always been foundational to our approach. If you remember our food pyramids and things like that, they were always on a foundation of activity, right? Exercise and physical activity.
That was the foundation.
That is the foundation. And then we set it up to maximize the presence of nutrients that are important, whether it is phytonutrients or amino acids or whatever it might be, and minimize the presence of simple sugars and saturated fats or whatever it might be. And that has been the philosophy and the goal of the Scientific Advisory Board all along, to develop these products and tools that allow people to pursue that NEO lifestyle and get the nutrients they need and the balance they need without the excesses that are so common in the modern industrial diet. So, Fred, I think that, you have been telling this story for probably longer than I can remember.
Yeah.
I can remember way back. And I can tell you that the fact that I remember a conversation we had 40 something years ago is testament to two things. Is testament to one, how convinced I was in your belief in that fact. And two, how your belief in that fact from decades ago has proven to be not only intuitive and insightful, but an alarm that more and more people should be paying attention to.
I agree. I just wish more people would do it. And, like I said before, we emphasize to our people, the Neolife people, what they should do, and many of them do it. I wish that they would spend more time, if they have it, more time recruiting people that need the information that we have.
Right.
Now, that's what our objective is.
Yes.
But sometimes we might be too focused on ourselves or a limited number of people. So I guess what I'm saying is they should take the flag, go out on the corner, and meet that person coming out of the supermarket with 12 packs of soft drink and, sign them up. Give them a lecture.
Yeah, I hear you. As we've talked about in the SAB, the problems that are going on in the population, we've been tracking these for decades. They have continually gotten worse decade after decade after decade. And the only way this is going to change, it isn't going to change by some governmental agency publishing a new piece of material or a new public service announcement about how bad this is. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen at the population level, at the grassroots level. And I think that's where our distributors and we can have the greatest capacity. It's getting people right in their homes, in their communities, to understand the problem, to realize that there are tools available from us that help them solve that, and to start that change there. because
Yeah.
you have to change it in yourself first before you can change it in others. And when you do that, you become a champion. People who come in and listen to us, even if they don't like anything that we've got to say, if they go away a little more aware of
That's
how
right.
important sugar can be to their health, or how important exercise can be to their health, or whatever it might be, or how detrimental sugar can be to their health, that you will have, probably added years to their life. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
Well,
Well, thank you, Fred.
yeah.
You know, thank you. We've been talking
Thank
about this, having this
thank
conversation
you.
for years. So I'm glad that we could get it done.
And I just want to say hello to all those Neolife distributors that I have spoken with and spoken to over the years. And I'm just disappointed that I'm not able to have that opportunity again to travel around the world and tell my story.
Yeah, be good to yourself. Okay.
All right. Thank you, John.
Bye bye.
All right.